Hi, everybody. I know everybody wants to just stand around and talk and have fun, but we have some work to do here. It will be fun. My name is Maggie Rivas Rodriguez, and I'm the director of the Center for Mexican American Studies. Thank you all so much for being here today. A little bit about the Center for Mexican American Studies, because I know a lot of you know the history, some of you may not know the history. So in 1970, when José was a graduate student, there were some graduate students who said, why is it that we're reading all of these books in English and history, and there's no representation about the Mexican-American experience? So they protested, and they did everything they could, and they enlisted the help of Américo Paredes, and I'm not sure who else, José, to change that. And so because of all of their efforts, there was the Center for Mexican American Studies that was established. Américo Paredes, who is here, who this is named for, and I know a lot of you have read his books, was the first director briefly, and then José Limón, who was still a graduate student, became its second director. I don't know if it was on an interim basis.
I was the acting director.
He was the acting director.
I was the director of acting.
Okay, it's going to be that kind of afternoon. So Américo Paredes holds a very special place in our hearts for all of those reasons, because he was someone that really was a path breaker, a pathfinder for Mexican American studies. And for that reason, that's why the award is named after him. As does José Limón, hold a very special place in the hearts of everyone here, for sure, but also generally in Mexican American studies. So thank you so much, José, for being here with us today. I do have to give a very brief commercial promo for CMAS, because I know that some of you know what we've been doing because we share offices or we're in the same building, but a lot of you don't. And so CMAS has been really super busy. We have reestablished our executive committee around thematic clusters. So those include expressive arts, STEM. We have our STEM representative standing, Eduardo Eddie Castillo back there, who's in, what is your field, Eddie? Biomedical engineering. Expressive arts, undergraduate students, women. Is that you? Maria Cotera? I am too. Hispanic serving institution status, equal rights, community relations, and academic freedom. These were all clusters, themes that were suggested and recommended by our affiliates, and it was a year-long process to establish this. I'm very, very proud of that. So nobody else really cares about it, but I really care about that. We also have, as part of, a few years ago, we were asked to start developing a history of Latinos on the UT campus. And so we started a couple of different projects. One of them is an edited volume about the history, an actual academic book. The other one is more informal, and it's about doing several group interviews. And we've been doing group interviews and oral history interviews that will be compiled into a Studs Terkel-like edition of that. So that's ongoing. It's going to be ongoing for a little while. We also have Emilio Zamora, who's one of the graduate students, right, from 1970? 71. Emilio Zamora is a history professor. I know most of you know him, but he's been working on a history of the Emma Esparientos Mexican American Cultural Center. And we do have a memoir writing workshop coming up. If you're interested in the memoir writing workshop, take my card. I will get back to you. So now what we've been waiting for. I am going to ask my dear colleague and friend, Maria Cotera, who is an associate professor in the Department of Mexican American and Latino Studies. She's a brilliant scholar, and she is also one of José Limon's former students. So she is one of two people who nominated Dr. Limón for this award. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have been tasked with saying a little bit about Dr. Paredes and why there's this award in his honor. So the Arts and Letters Award honors the memory of Don Américo Paredes, a renowned musician, scholar, and folklorist, as well as a UT alum. Born in Brownsville, Texas, Paredes, a folklorist by training, spent his entire life documenting and writing about the history, culture, and music of what he called Greater Mexico. His innovative folklore work, and particularly his foundational book, With His Pistol in His Hand, inspired a generation of Chicano folklorists, ethnographers, and literary critics who would continue this work, laying the foundation for the field of Chicano studies. And often With His Pistol in His Hand is referenced as the sort of Bible or foundational text of Chicano studies. As testament to his importance to the study of life and letters in the Southwest, Paredes, as we noted earlier, became the first director of the Center for Mexican American Studies, which was established in 1970 after student activists at the University of Texas agitated for the creation of an academic program that reflected their lives, experiences, and ways of knowing. And by the way, I should note, anyone coming for CMAS, I'm talking to you, Texas Ledge, better watch out, because I can well imagine Dr. Paredes with pistol in hand coming for them in their dreams. Unbeknownst to most was Paredes' prolific creative writing from the interwar years. His short story collection, The Hammond and the Beans, his novella, The Shadow, and his monumental account of borderlands male subjectivity, George Washington Gomez, were all uncovered in the 90s, bringing renewed attention to his nuanced understanding of the socio-historical dimensions of the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. For many, he was the father of Chicano studies. But for some fortunate young scholars, like the man whose contributions to Mexican American studies we are celebrating today, he was also a cherished mentor. If Dr. Paredes always paid it forward, so too did his student, José Limón, who in later years would recognize something that could be nurtured in me, by all practical measures at the time, a very unpromising graduate student. In fact, I was admitted to the English department provisionally and with no funding, and Dr. Limón stepped in and gave me a research assistantship and a TA position that got me into graduate school, helped me survive it, and basically put me on the path to writing about Jovita Gonzalez. Indeed, Dr. Limón is the reason I got my master's degree at UT, and later my PhD at Stanford. He introduced me to Paredes and the folklore of the Southwest, and later, quite importantly, to Jovita Gonzalez, who became one of the central figures in my dissertation and later book, Native Speakers. He believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And he nurtured my passion for learning, writing, and analysis by treating me like a future colleague rather than simply another student. Dr. Limón's model of mentorship, learned in part from his own mentor, Américo Paredes, is something that I've carried with me throughout my career as a scholar. And for that, I wish I could award him my own personal certificate of appreciation. I'm delighted and very honored to welcome José back to campus and to celebrate his many contributions to the field of Mexican American studies.
We have a short video we'd like to show first.
As we said, I am the director of the Center for Mexican American Studies. In order to be the director of the Center for Mexican American Studies, one has to first be a professor. So in many ways, that's really what I mostly am, a professor at the university. And being a professor is simply really a teacher. And that's how I most like to think of myself, much like your teachers here. The kinds of things that I teach have to do with the culture and the history of the Mexican people who live in the United States.
My name is Dr. Anna Nogar, And José Limón was my PhD dissertation co-director and mentor while I was a student at UT Austin. I learned a huge amount from José Limón, but one thing that really stands out to me is that he was always a wonderful and professional advocate. I learned a great deal about professional formation, how to be a Mexican-American scholar in the field, what things to take on the chin, what things to take to heart, and what things to let go. And I know I wouldn't be where I am now if it weren't for his patience and advocacy.
Hi, my name is Susie Seraph. José Limón was my thesis advisor. I think it's probably not too much to say that he changed my life. He taught me to think critically, to write eloquently, to always historically contextualize everything I was talking about, to love and recognize greater Mexican folklore, but also recognize the subversive potential of folklore in context of Anglo domination.
And that is the relatively unexamined life of literary life of Limón Josa as writer in Spanish, especially since obviously, as we know, he is trained formally with his PhD in Spanish and Portuguese.
Hi, my name is Cristina Garcia Lopez, and José Limón was my advisor. I learned to imagine scholarly possibilities beyond what I thought was possible, and that pursuing my interest in spirituality as a central topic in my scholarship was an instinct that I could and should follow.
My name is Olga Herrera, and José Limón was my advisor. I graduated in 2011. From Dr. Limón, I learned about the significance of place in literature, whether we were discussing Texas or Chicago in the Midwest. I learned about how to be an intellectually challenging and supportive and generous mentor from Dr. Limón. His mentorship in supporting us to research the places that were really important to us is something that I can't even describe the value that it has to me.
My name is Luis Mendoza. I was a student of José Limón's from 1990 to 1994. Jose taught me a great many things. Most of all, I think, was how to bring your whole self into the classroom as a Chicano teacher. And he was also very understanding when life got in the way of your progress, So he was patient, he was supportive, he was persistent in making sure that you believed enough in yourself to set out what you wanted to do. And he stood by your side and he challenged you and questioned you, but he made you a better thinker and a better person.
Thank you so much, José Limón. You deserve all this and more, más que merecido.
And I think that's why they asked me to introduce you, because I may know a lot more about you than most people. The good things and the not so good things, but mostly good things. It is really a pleasure, Jose. Everybody, mira David. People always start by saying it's an honor and a pleasure. It truly is an honor and a pleasure to introduce you. Have a few words, be patient. His record is long. And I think we need to do justice to it as much as we can. I present to you José Limón, the recipient of the Américo Paredes Arts and Letters Award. The award has special meaning that goes beyond José's distinguished academic career. The award carries the cherished name of Professor Paredes and acknowledges the special relationship José had with Professor Paredes as a longtime student, friend, and colleague, particularly in building Mexican-American studies at the University of Texas, and even beyond. José was born in Laredo, raised in Corpus Christi, where he attended Del Mar College and secured an associate degree there. He came to the University of Texas and obtained degrees, an MA degree in English, a bachelor's degree in philosophy, and finally, in 1978, a doctorate in cultural anthropology folklore at the University of Texas at Austin. While here, José was involved in the student movement, including organizations like the Students for a Democratic Society, the Mexican American Student Organization, and the Mexican American Youth Organization, first as a member and then as an advisor acting as a liaison between the undergraduate and graduate students and Américo Paredes. And he was involved in the establishment of CIMAS in a difficult and drawn-out fight, all along serving as a liaison between Paredes and the undergraduate and graduate students who served as a base for the campaign to establish CIMAS. Soon after CIMAS was established, José served 2 stints as the acting director of CIMAS in 73-74 and in 1985-86. He subsequently became the director for the Center in Folklore, Center for Studies in Folklore and Ethnomusicology in 86-87, and the chair of the American Studies program at UC Santa Cruz between 87 and 1990. He returned to UT to serve as the director of CIMAS between 2000 and 2010. He moved to the Notre Dame University, where he headed the Institute for Latino Studies between 2012 and 2016. That's a pretty extensive administrative record. Keep that in mind when you hear about the academic work that he was able to do at the same time. Limón retired from the University of Texas as a Moody C. Boatwright Regents Professor of American and English Literature with emeritus status. Notre Dame University granted him the Notre Dame Foundation Endowed Professor of American Literature Emeritus beginning in 2016. José built an extraordinary publication record while serving the previously noted administrative duties. He has published 4 well-received single-authored books, 3 edited and special journal issues, and at least 45, I believe, peer-reviewed articles or chapters in books. Besides his endowed professorships, José has received numerous honors. I'll mention 3, some of the more recent ones. Number 1, he was inducted into the Distinguished Folklore Fellows of the American Folklore Society in 2013. In 2017, he received the Américo Paredes Prize for Excellence in Folklore Scholarship from the American Folklore Society. And in 2018, he was recognized with a Distinguished Scholarly Achievement Award from the Western Literature Association. He has supervised at least 18 dissertations. I don't know if there's any master's thesis in that count or not, but it's 18 dissertations, which is a major accomplishment. Again, keep in mind his busy career as both an administrator and as a scholar. He had time for students, in other words. On a personal note, I need to say a couple of things. I don't believe that I would be here if not for you, José. Your generous support, has extended over a long time. But there's one particular time that you call the blue period when we were trying to deal with some challenges that came our way. And you, among other things, put me up in your apartment, 2 apartments, for at least a year and a half. And that basically saved me in my career. And I thank you for that. José has a long record of excellent literary analysis as well as studies on history and interpretations of contemporary society, work that is often embedded in his studies. His texts and contexts are impressive enough. I find his pretext, his motivations, his concerns about recovering text ideas and histories especially important, particularly his observations in his writings and conversations that affirm a regional Mexican school of thought or an intellectual tradition of shared opinions as Mexican scholars in Texas. He has been a principal exponent and an example of a Mexican Texan voice that includes, among others, Américo Paredes and other people that are in this room. This is not the time to debate on whether such a regional school of thought exists, but I think that José has been a leading exponent of the idea, embodying the role of the responsible Mexican intellectual. In this era of introspection, his writing is characterized by precision and richness, staunchly defending a Mexican identity. Mexican, the noun, not the adjective. With his pen in hand, he boldly asserts his Mexican heritage using language that is essential and self-affirming. José is part of a generation of Mexican scholars who, for the first time in our history, include themselves as both subjects and observers in their work. He approaches this task with remarkable skill, empathy, and a deep love for his people. José, te felicito por tu gran conocimiento, por tu apoyo tan generoso con muchos de nosotros y por tu constancia en la vida así como en tu trabajo. Thank you.
Remind me to rehearse this next time. So, this is his award to José Limón. I will read it. The Center for Mexican American Studies at the University of Texas at Austin presents its Américo Paredes Arts and Letters Award to José E. Limón for his many contributions to creating and expanding the field of Mexican American Studies. April 4th, 2024.
This sort of thing has happened to me only once before when I received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Western Literature Association. And those folks very formally asked me to present a lecture with a capital L for the occasion. We decided that this was not particularly that kind of occasion, but that perhaps I might offer some remarks, as they say, okay? And remarks that I call a brief commentary. And I promise to try to keep it that brief, that is. Okay. Sometimes my glasses fail me depending on the angle of vision, so they're going to have to come off in case that shocks you. Okay. Indeed, when we were debating about whether it should be a lecture or not lecture, whatever, I did have a title, so I'll share that title with you, even though what you're going to hear is much, much more informal. The title was On Life, Letters, and Mexican American Studies, a brief commentary. In this informal brief commentary, I would like to thank the several people and institutions responsible for this wonderful award. Truly a capstone to my life and career. In so doing, I would like to structure my expressions of gratitude relative to the development of this life and career, and thus perhaps also offer a kind of mini intellectual and political history of UT Austin and the state of Texas over this same period. And perhaps that might be coming at a very timely moment. However, let me begin at the end of this process, which is this event this evening, by first thanking the Center for Mexican American Studies, its director, Maggie Rivas, and her staff, but also its executive committee, represented this afternoon by Maria Cotera and Emilio Zamora. Maria's and Emilio's remarks were very generous and permeated with their characteristic kindness and their close friendship to me over the major part of my adult life. They speak of my achievements, but I think of both of them as significant achievements in themselves, in which I had the privilege of contributing to their wonderful careers. My relationships to them and to Maggie were significantly formed within this university. And indeed, it was at this University of Texas at Austin where my own adult life and my career were created and shaped. So, as that life and career are coming to a close, this is an appropriate moment to thank this university for making my receipt of this award possible through my education here in this place, both formal and informal education. Indeed, a good part of the informal part of this education happened in this very building, the Texas Union, within its meeting rooms, including this one. but also in the food service area called the chuck wagon, now sadly gone, along with its 35-cent cheeseburgers. Let me begin by offering some words. I'll try to keep them to a few on from where, what and how I got here in the very first place. As Emilio noted, I was born in 1944 in Laredo, Texas. By the way, a place to which I also owe much. And I now also wish to thank that city of that particular time for instilling in me what I have always called a Laredo sensibility, which then enabled everything else. Time does not permit me to flesh that out, so take it as it is. My family moved from Laredo to Corpus Christi when I was 10, and I arrived at UT in 1964 as a transfer student from a junior college in that city, Del Mar, with the encouragement of our family doctor, Cleotilde Garcia, an MD from the University of Texas Medical School in Galveston, and also, as it happens, a UT Austin alumna, class of 1938. She herself had started with an Associate of Arts degree from a junior college in the Rio Grande Valley. She, of course, expected me to be a doctor. Okay? But as it turned out, I came to UT at that moment simply to obtain a BA in English, perhaps with some supporting work in education, and then to return promptly to Corpus Christi, hopefully to teach English at Roy Miller High School, from which I had graduated in 1962. I say simply, but it was a bit more complicated than that. My working class parents did not want me to leave home for college, or at least not too far away Austin. Esa es otra gente, my mom said. Algo te puede pasar. Those are other people. Something could happen to you. I wish she was here today so she could see that indeed algo me pasó. Right? Although overall, not what she feared from that otra gente. My parents much preferred that I attend Texas A&I in nearby Kingsville, now an A&M institution. I now reflect that had I done so, I would have met Emilio Zamora earlier. At the core of their argument for A&I, they pointed to our insurance agent, a young Mexican-American man named Carlos Truan, who had graduated from A&I and who seemed to be doing very well, my mother said. My mother carefully pointed out that he always wore a crisp white shirt with a tie, dress pants, and dress shoes as he pedaled his bicycle all over the Mexican west side of Corpus Christi, going door to door, selling his insurance policies, carrying his contracts in the saddlebags on the bike. If I were to go to college, my parents also wanted me to major in business, just like Carlitos had. Of course, those of you more or less my age who grew up in Texas will recall, of course, that Carlos went on to be state senator, Carlos Truan, and very helpful in the development of CIMAS. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself. Back to 1964 and my arrival at UT, made financially possible, by the way, by the former Soviet Union, which had launched its satellite Sputnik in 1957 and thus made possible the National Defense Education Act, which paid for my way here. So I am obliged this afternoon to include the Soviet Union in my lineup of muchas gracias. Okay. What I could not know in 1964 was that I would spend the longest part of my life from age 20 until age 67 in 2010 at the University of Texas at Austin. You are not to conclude that I was dropping out or on scholastic probation. Not once, not ever. There was too much at stake. That long period as a student at UT Austin, BA, MA, PhD, and then as a faculty member, was significantly spent within what is now the College of Liberal Arts, although when I first arrived, it was the College of Arts and Sciences. Thus, I must also centrally thank the college and at least 4 of its departments and programs for making this award possible through the kind of education and faculty opportunities they afforded me. Let me say a bit about this unusual education. When I enrolled in arts and sciences, my plan, as I noted, was to major in English and return to Corpus in 2 years, but that quickly went awry when an academic advisor said I had to have a minor. As it happened in 1962, in my final year of high school, I was taking mechanical drawing, hoping at the time to become a draftsman. The younger ones among you have no idea what that means. And for my drafting teacher, I had a most unusual teacher, Chipman G. Stewart, a man who read widely and who saw something in me that led him to suggest and loan me books he had read. Among them, Will Durant's The Story of Philosophy, that had actually been published in 1926, but reissued in 1960 as a popular paperback. Enthralled with this book, at the University of Texas, I then chose philosophy as my minor, taking courses beyond the minor with formidable teachers such as Irwin Chet Lieb, John Silber, Tom Swing, and Karsten Harries. John Silber would soon become Dean of Arts and Sciences, and together with Professor Harry Ransom of the English department, would soon transform this university into something much closer to a university of the first class. I soon made philosophy my major, although I continued to take enough courses in English for a double major, since I still had my plan to return to Corpus upon graduation in 1966. I therefore spent my undergraduate years going back and forth from Wagner to Parlin Hall and to the Texas Union for those cheeseburgers. But this movement shifted decisively to Parlin in the fall of 1966, when after graduation, I entered the graduate program in English rather than going home. There were a number of reasons for this, not to mention that the Armadillo World headquarters had opened up, where I first saw the Stones, and along with Anton's, a blues club where I first saw B.B. King. That's more than enough to keep a young man in Austin, Texas. Okay? However, Chip Stewart, that mechanical drawing teacher back at Roy Miller, had also advised me that as a Mexican American, if I had an M.A., it would be easier to get a job teaching English. In giving me this advice, Chip Stewart was merely recognizing the generally hostile racial attitude toward Mexican Americans at that time throughout a good bit of South Texas, certainly in Corpus Christi. A bit of an irony, don't you think, for a city whose Latinate name means the body of Christ. But such racial animosity could also be found at UT at that moment. It ranged from the chilly demeanor of my fellow students, not all of them, but some, especially since I was the only Mexican American in the English department. It ranged from that to drunken Anglo fraternity boys driving down the university's main street, the drag, calling out Mexican ethnic slurs when they saw me and other of the few Mexican Americans at UT walking along the university's main street. Among the more tepid slurs, "Go home, spick." As you well know, this main street, just outside this room, much like the name Corpus Christi, has the ironical name of Guadalupe, named after that once beautiful Texas river. Let me say it again, that once beautiful Texas river that itself had been named by the Spanish in honor of the Virgen of Guadalupe. To this day, many Anglos in Texas and even some Mexican Americans like to pronounce it Guadalupe, which always makes me cringe. This racial ambience and my memory of South Texas contributed to my participation in the emerging ethnic nationalist Chicano student movement when, in 1967, I joined the University of Texas chapter of the statewide Mexican American Student Organization, later the Mexican American Youth Organization. Among others, David Montejano, the eminent historian who honors us with his presence this evening, was one of its organizers and also witnessed this kind of racism. David, stand up and take a bow, please. But at the same time, I had also begun an immersion in Marxism and the New Left by also joining the exclusively Anglo Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. SDS member and UT alum Alice Embry has written a fine memoir of that moment at UT Austin, and I shall always be grateful to her for welcoming me to the first meeting of SDS that I attended. I think she's still around these parts, right? Yeah. The central concern of SDS at the time was the anti-Vietnam War movement, in which SDS organized what is still seen as the largest protest demonstration on this campus, numbering in the thousands. In the second year of my MA program at UT in 1967, however, and as part of my departmental support, I was seemingly randomly assigned as a teaching assistant to one Professor Américo Paredes, whom in a large department I had never even heard of before. He taught folklore and American literature, and although I had been spending my own time in the thickets of Victorian literature and the Renaissance, my one undergraduate survey class in American literature had caught his attention as he looked at the list of applicants. But much more so, he told me later, he took note of my Spanish surname on the list of applicants. Since I was completing my MA, with the encouragement and support of some wonderful faculty members in the English department, I began to apply for PhD programs in English in the Ivy Leagues and other high-ranking places and received some acceptances. This is also the time to acknowledge and thank English Department Professors Emeritus Norman Farmer, Robert Twombly, Jim Ayers, but also the late Joseph Maloff, and above all, the late David J. Delar, for their support. I'm very late in expressing this, but I thought this might be the proper occasion. We have a couple of representatives from the English department, so please, I'm going to use you as surrogates. So there. Tom Garza and Elizabeth Richmond Garza are with us this afternoon. However, I did not leave UT after all, even with those acceptances. In very short order, Professor Paredes persuaded me to remain at UT and enroll in the relatively new PhD program in anthropological folklore, but also to join him in the founding and development of the also new Center for Mexican American Studies, a product of the Chicano student movement led by, among others, Amancio Chapa and again David Montejano, but also Marta Cotera, Maria's mom. In 1970, Mr. Paredes became the first CIMA's director, and I was his primary assistant, while I also taught some of the very first courses in Mexican American Studies. Among other mandates, we were instructed to negotiate the hiring of several new assistant professors with specialties in Mexican American Studies in different departments of the College of Liberal Arts, but also in education, where the distinguished Professor George I. Sanchez had just passed, leaving an enormous void. Among our first recruitments as an assistant professor was Dr. Gilberto Cárdenas in sociology, who also honors us with his presence. ¿Dónde está Gilberto? Stand up, Gilberto. Two very important CIMA staff members from that time must also be mentioned, although I don't think they're here. Wave if you are. And that is Linda Campos and Mauricio Zúñiga. Now, as it happens, Mr. and Miss Zúñiga. By 1972, an unfortunate set of circumstances led Professor Paredes to resign as director. In a very unusual decision, I was asked to serve as acting director to hold the program together for 1 year, even though I was still a graduate student working on my dissertation. Subsequent new directors in the mid-1970s could not find a place for me at CIMAS, and needing a job, I accepted a faculty appointment at the new University of Texas at San Antonio, teaching 4 classes a semester while still writing my dissertation, which also taught me to never, ever let my future PhD students go ABD. Here, I must also express my posthumous gratitude to the late Tomás Rivera. Of course, all of us know him best as a premier writer of Chicano literature, author of Y no se lo tragó la tierra, among many other works. But at that moment, in 1975, he was also serving as vice president for academic affairs at UTSA, and he hired me. Not only did he then provide me with a livelihood, but he provided me with an exciting moment in a new university's formation, and all of this in San Antonio. J. Frank Dobie once said that every Texan has 2 hometowns, the place where he or she was born and raised, and San Antonio. An observation perhaps more true for Mexican Americans in Texas, our cultural capital, if you will. Being in San Antonio for 3 years also permitted me easy access to Austin and Américo Paredes while I completed my dissertation under his able direction. When the dissertation was completed in 1978, I accepted an invitation for a postdoctoral fellowship at UCLA under the sponsorship of the late Juan Gómez Quiñones, a professor of history and director of the UCLA Chicano Studies and Research Center. And from him, I learned much of what I knew about Mexican American history, even while I came to know California. It was then, by the way, that I also met my present wife, Teresa, completing her UCLA PhD in comparative literature, who then went on to a stellar career at that other Los Angeles campus, USC, including becoming the first and the last Mexican-American chair of their English department. She, by the way, also spent a postdoctoral year at UT Austin with Américo Paredes in 1981-82. Due to family medical issues, she could not be with us today, but she also deserves much credit for this award, and she sends her love and appreciation to many of you who know her. At the end of that 1978-79 UCLA postdoctoral year, I had to make what still ranks for me as the most difficult decision of my professional life. Should I return to my beloved San Antonio and UTSA, or accept an offer of an assistant professorship of anthropology at UCLA, or accept an offer to return to UT Austin as an assistant professor of anthropology with a joint appointment in English? Mr. Paredes was, of course, obviously arguing. I was trying to think of a better word than arguing, a stronger word than arguing, for UT Austin, and one, of course, could not say no to Américo Paredes. Other than an unfortunate absence to teach 2 years at UC Santa Cruz, I won't go into the sordid details of that, I then spent the rest of my career here at UT. It is this career that at UT I think is the principal reason that I have been honored this evening. But I did want to say something to you, as I said, about how I got here in the first place. In receiving this honor, undoubtedly my scholarship may be the central reason for this award, and I am grateful for that recognition. Based on my education in 3 different areas of inquiry, philosophy, literature, and anthropology, I have tried to produce a body of scholarship that tries to be faithful to all 3, based on my education here at UT. From philosophy, work guided by fundamental ideas. From literature, an appreciation for the aesthetics of language and the imagination. And from anthropology, work grounded in what Raymond Williams called lived experience. And by the way, I am not done yet. Since retirement, I have published 5 articles, and I have a forthcoming 5th book. But this background and this scholarship then carried over into 2 other dimensions of my career. First, my teaching, particularly my supervision of 32, not 18, 32 PhD students in anthropology, English, American Studies, ethnomusicology, and even Spanish with special permission from the Department of Spanish. I was never a faculty member in Spanish. In addition to that, also a few particularly outstanding MA students, such as Maria Cotera. Several of these were also products, by the way, of the CIMA's doctoral portfolio. And it deserves a great deal of credit for the production of these students. And to that, I must also credit, is he still here? I can't see all the way. Is Richard Flores around? Or ¿ya se fue? He's gone, okay. Richard Flores was the primary person within CIMAS responsible for the creation of the portfolio, and he never gets enough credit for that. All but 3 of these doctoral students are currently successful faculty at liberal arts colleges and major universities, such as Brown, Colorado, UNM, Illinois Urbana, as well as your distinguished Richard Flores here at the University of Texas, but also another faculty member here at the University of Texas, Susie Seraf. Then there is also my directorship of the Center for Mexican American Studies from 2000 to 2010 that I think also is part of the reason for this award. There, in my directorship, I was ably assisted by Ms. Dolores Garcia, my senior administrative assistant, who is also here with us this afternoon. Dolores, thank you. She's sitting next to her husband, Gil Cardenas, whom she finally settled down. I'm never going to get invited to their home again, I bet. Okay. Dolores ran the day-to-day administrative operations for CIMAS, but her real passion was our public outreach, such as the famous CIMAS concert she largely put together, featuring Sonny and the Sunliners, Ruben Ramos and the Mexican Revolution, and Little Joe y La Familia. I understand that Little Joe is being honored later this afternoon over at the Benson Collection, or so I thought I heard. Okay. My particular passion as CIMAS director was sponsoring faculty recruitment and development in the belief that faculty research and teaching are at the center of any academic unit. During my directorship, we added 17 new Mexican American Studies faculty in anthropology. Thank you. In anthropology, English, government, history, sociology, art history, and education. Most of them are still here, I believe, since I follow their careers closely, and all of them are very successful. This is also a moment to express my gratitude and appreciate for one of the former deans of the College of Liberal Arts, Richard Lariviere, who was enormously helpful in this endeavor. So let me close. And in closing, let me express again my enormous sense of gratitude for this award. But here I also have to say that this gratitude and my thanks must be extended across time and space to many people and institutions that made me whatever it is I became to now merit this award, beginning with my parents, Chip Stewart, Dr. Cleo, as we used to call her, Dr. Clotilde Garcia, most centrally to the University of Texas at Austin and its faculty in the College of Arts and Sciences, now the College of Liberal Arts. But within that college, of course, I must acknowledge the centrality of Professor Américo Paredes. Always Mr. Paredes to me, that's a whole other story, by the way, whose name is on this award. He has been with me all of my adult life, not only in my head, but in my heart, and will remain so to the end of my days. And now let me close simply by thanking all of you for being here this afternoon. Thank you.